let's explain what exactly the theory is that happened to this supposed ancient civilization, right? What happened? Okay, well, the science suggests that is really starting to really come out as basically confirmed at this point. They haven't officially announced it, but it's going to be eventually, in my opinion, is that 13,000 years ago, the Earth passed through the disintegrating tail of a comet and was hit by multiple massive projectiles, okay? Like we've just been talking about, these huge explosions happening in the sky everywhere, with some objects actually hitting the ground. The majority of the impact was on the Laurentide ice sheet on top of Canada and parts of northern United States. 2-mile thick glacier of ice that had been sitting there for hundreds of thousands, probably millions of years.
And that ice sheet is thicker than what the North or South Pole is today, right?
Yeah, we're talking 2 miles thick of solid ice, glacial ice, super thick. And this huge blast of heat from these objects hit this glacial ice, melting a decent portion of it all at one time, vaporized massive amounts of water molecules up into the atmosphere. And the meltwater from that heat cooled down as it rushed across the glacier until it finally entered into the oceans, completely disrupting the currents of the ocean of the time, the conveyor belt system of heat and cold to keep the climate stable. So that happens, destabilizing climate, the temperatures globally. And then the ejection cloud of the comet and impacts wrapped around the whole planet, blocking out the sun completely. And also the heat from the impacts sets fire to 10% of the Earth's biomaterial. And 10% of all of the Earth's forests burning at one time, the amount of life lost would be unfathomable. Like 10%. So that goes around the planet. You get all this smoke also going up into the atmosphere, and you have a recipe for the whole temperatures globally to then drop, which is exactly what we see what happens in the ice core data that we've done so far. You have around 15,000 and 13,000 years ago, and then boosh, a massive spike in temperature from where we got hit, most likely. And the fallout makes that temperature drop back down into freezing. And the bottom of the temperature drop is called the Younger Dryas. 1,000 years of what's basically nuclear fallout until something happens again around 12,000 years ago. 12,000, it was 11, crap. I forget the exact date.
I think it might be 11,800.
That's probably it. But it's somewhere around that time period where we come out of the Younger Dryas into the super warm climate that we're in right now. And there's a bunch of different ideas how that could have happened. Robert Schoch has the idea that we were hit by a solar flare. And how that would make sense is that the object that we went through 13,000 years ago hit the sun, creating a massive coronal ejection into space that the planet then went through and heated up real quick. And there's a lot of things to suggest that, ancient people saw these crazy patterns by the lights in the sky from all that radiation hitting the atmosphere, and they drew out these pictures. That's fair enough. Or the idea is that we got hit by another object, but this time into the ocean. And if it did that, first of all, the tsunami it would create would be biblical. and it would vaporize and eject trillions of gallons of water up into the atmosphere all at one time. That would then condense and rain back down to the planet for days to weeks to months on end, as stated in the Bible and many other ancient myths all across the planet. And now that the whole climate is so humid, it would then get baked by the sun and then level out into the modern climate that we experience. And it would just kind of gradually bring it up and cool it down, or warm it up, basically, as guess. But that's all just theoretical. That's obviously none of that is actual proven anything yet. It's just a way of thinking about it now. But and so as the temperatures increase and level out, all of the glacial ice that has been existing for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years begins melting, and at some points melting rapidly, to where the water from the melting would pool into these massive lakes on top of the ice that still existed, until as it could no longer hold back the weight of all that water, it would break, releasing all of that water down the landscape at one time. Imagine a 1,000-foot wave, several miles across, tearing across your neighborhood at 60 to 100 miles an hour. All that depends on how steep the grade is when it comes to the ground, like how steep the hills are. If it's steep, that water will be moving extremely fast.
Right. And say that did happen, these ice lakes that just break under pressure. That's what Randall Carlson is talking about when he's discussing the I think it's in Washington, the Washington Scablands.
Yes. Yep. Washington Scablands, Potholes Cataract, Camas Prairie Ripples, Dry Falls. And one of the big stories in the academic world is called the Missoula Flood. That was one of the really big breaks where it just completely decimated a massive portion. I'm not sure how to spell that off the top of my head, but the Missoula Flood was one of the really big ones that took place. But all that water from all that melting had to go somewhere. So all the ocean levels globally rose by 400 feet to where they are now in our modern day.
In what time frame did that rise of 400 feet happen? Do you know that by any chance?
I want to say it was about 300 years. I'm not positive about that off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and look at the actual charts again. But about 300 years from going from where they were to 400 feet deeper.
Which is still a significant difference. But as you mentioned earlier, if a huge comet or a fragment of a comet hits the ocean and creates a massive tsunami, that is a flood that just happens instantly in a day, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like that would be, we're talking a tsunami wave 600 feet high, going 200 miles an hour in your direction. There's no escaping that. And we see evidence of those kind of tsunamis in Madagascar. It's called these chevrons. It's where the tsunami wave is pulling all of this sediment from the ocean floor with it. And once it hits land, it begins to deposit all of that material on land.
How do you spell that? Chevron?
Chevron. Chevron. I want to say chevron.
That's new to me. I haven't heard about that yet.
I would look at Madagascar chevrons for that. The object likely did hit within the Indian Ocean, and it had, if the crater they think they found, I'm pretty sure they found a crater there. There's no good pictures of it though. That's 18 miles across at the bottom of the Indian Ocean.